Jupiter in Cancer learns the world through the lens of home. Their earliest experiences with family, whether through nurturing or through fight, act as a kind of emotional blueprint, shaping how they understand love, security, and expansion. Here, growth does not arrive in grand gestures or career milestones. It arrives in quiet moments, the way a hand is held during a storm, the unspoken understanding between siblings, the ritual of shared meals that anchor the spirit. So every family interaction becomes a lesson in empathy, patience, and resilience. They are acutely aware that emotions, like water, have a flow and a rhythm. And a part of their journey is learning how to navigate those tides without being swept away. This is a placement that teaches that emotional growth is not linear. There are cycles of opening and retreating, of giving and receiving, of remembering the past while building something new. They expand when they allow themselves to feel fully, when they confront old wounds rather than hiding behind duty or caretaking. Family, in this way, becomes both a mirror and a teacher. The conflicts, the loyalties, the unspoken patterns, these all serve as huge life lessons. They're here to cultivate deep emotional intelligence, a wisdom that goes beyond intellect, rooted in the experience and the heartfelt understanding of the emotional landscape. Jupiter in Cancer's journey is about learning that abundance is not external. It's actually the courage to embrace vulnerability, the willingness to hold space for others without losing oneself, and the grace to turn family dynamics into opportunities for self-discovery. Emotional growth comes through reflection, through allowing love to stretch beyond their comfort zone, and through seeing that the heart is really capable of far more than it was ever taught. Jupiter in Cancer moves through life carrying a quiet, almost sacred awareness of the ties that bind. From their earliest memories, the home is more than just a physical space. It is a container for growth, a laboratory for understanding and learning about love, loyalty, and emotional truth. Growth for Jupiter in Cancer comes not through ambition or conquest, but through presence. They expand when they show up fully for the people that they care about, when they notice what others need without being asked, and when they honor the emotional cycles of those around them while attending to their own inner tides. Family, in all of its complexity, becomes a real mirror reflecting both their potential and their vulnerabilities. They may feel very weighed down by inherited patterns, by unspoken expectations, and by the ghosts of familial wounds. Yet these are the very challenges that become the soil in which their capacity for empathy and emotional intelligence grows. So learning to navigate this terrain, it really requires courage. The courage to confront disappointment, to witness conflict without dissolving into it, and to recognize that love is not possession, but a fluid exchange. Emotional growth for Jupiter in Cancer is equally cyclical. There are going to be these times where they simply just want to retreat into their shell, like the crab, pulling back from the world to process and digest their experiences. And then there are times where they expand outward, radiating care, generosity, even warmth. They are really gifted in seeing the invisible. Things like, seeing a bit of grief in a joke that maybe a sibling hides behind, or the anxiety that a parent masks behind their routines. The subtle ways that love is expressed beyond words. And this ability, it really allows them to cultivate deep relational wisdom, teaching others how to feel seen and supported without judgment. Yet, the shadow of this placement can manifest as overprotection or clinginess, control, the fear that giving too much love or attention might leave them depleted. So the lesson is that abundance is in the emotional realm, and it can't be hoarded. It has to flow. It has to circulate. And it must be balanced with self-nurturing. Jupiter in Cancer's philosophy of life is inherently relational. They understand that true expansion is completely inseparable from connection. They grow by honoring their roots while learning to create their own emotional architecture. A home that is not defined solely by geography or blood, but by trust and empathy, shared vulnerability, rituals, traditions, and memories. These things, they really become the tools for growth. Each one a reminder that life's richness is measured not in material wealth or accolades, but in the depth and the quality of bonds that they cultivate in this lifetime. Their abundance is expressed through hospitality, through acts of service, through creating spaces where people can feel safe to express their full humanity. In this way, they can be healers, not necessarily in a formal sense, but in the way they allow others to feel whole, even temporarily, by fully being present. The evolutionary journey of Jupiter in Cancer is ultimately about balancing care for self with the care for others. They are really called to step beyond the confines of the familial world and to embrace uncertainty. The most profound lessons in life, they really come from these intimate, often messy interactions. The sibling rivalry that teaches patience, the parental criticism that teaches resilience, the small acts of love and forgiveness that teach the expansiveness of the heart. So when they succeed, Jupiter in Cancer becomes a real force of gentle yet profound influence. They show that emotional intelligence and compassion, these are just as powerful as, ambition. Their story is one of cycles, returning to the same shores again and again, each time with a deeper awareness of themselves and others. In learning to navigate the currents of family and emotion, they really truly discover that the heart is both a vessel and a compass, capable of holding immense love while also guiding them towards wisdom and resilience, an ever-expanding sense of belonging. Growth is not something to be rushed or forced. It's cultivated in patience. It is nurtured in connection and harvested in moments of recognition and intimacy. For Jupiter in Cancer, one of the simplest yet the most profound practices is presence, truly listening to a loved one, noticing the unspoken, allowing someone to exist fully without judgment. Journaling about family patterns or ancestral stories, or even personal emotional cycles can be really, really transformative, helping them understand how the past, it really shapes their present, and giving clarity on where to release old emotional baggage. Creating sacred spaces in the home, whether a cozy reading nook, a corner for reflection, or a small altar, maybe honoring their ancestors. This really anchors Jupiter in Cancer in a sense of security while also allowing them to cultivate abundance in small, tangible ways. Also, cooking or sharing meals becomes more than nourishment. It becomes an act of emotional generosity, a way of giving love in a material form. Jupiter in Cancer also expands through care without attachment. So, setting healthy emotional boundaries while still showing generosity and support, this is a key practice. They need to learn that abundance is not hoarded and love is not measured by control, but actually by allowing space for others to grow alongside them. So, reflecting on their own emotional responses, noticing where overprotection or clinging arises, and, consciously choosing to step back when, these feelings kind of come up for them, that's part of the growth here. Jupiter in Cancer thrives when they really celebrate emotional wins, however small. Recognizing moments of empathy, courage, or emotional insight really reinforces their philosophy that true expansion comes not from the outer world, but from the depths of the heart. Their life can become a quiet yet profound testament to how much they can grow once they're willing to really release external validation and expectations. Jupiter in Cancer also thrives through creative expression. Music, poetry, pottery, art. These can all be used to process feelings that are too deep or complicated for words alone. So things like singing in the shower or playing an instrument, even just doodling in a notebook. It's not just leisure. It's a form of emotional calibration, a way to expand the internal landscapes and to integrate feelings. Through creativity, they can really practice vulnerability in a safe way, learning that expression itself can be nourishing. Another key evolutionary lesson here is honoring ancestry and lineage. Jupiter in Cancer, it often carries the unspoken stories of generations, patterns of resilience, of trauma, survival. So part of their growth is really to confront the inherited emotional material that shapes their perceptions of security and love. They are asked to really reflect on how these patterns influence their choices, their relationships, and, of course, their sense of home. So through conscious awareness, they can really transform inherited fear into wisdom and inherited loyalty into compassion. They can really become the alchemists of the heart, converting family history into emotional intelligence, empathy, even the capacity for healing. Trust and belonging, these are central to their journey. Evolution asks them to cultivate environments where they and others can feel safe, and to recognize that the feeling of home is as much internal as it is external. They're learning to find refuge in themselves, to carry stability in the heart even when external circumstances shift. This internal sense of safety really allows them to navigate the world with confidence, to expand without being tethered to fear or attachment, and to offer real sanctuary to others without losing their own center. Jupiter in Cancer's evolutionary path also really emphasizes emotional literacy. They're being guided to feel deeply, to reflect, and to express emotions in ways that are healthy and generative. Part of their growth involves confronting discomfort, allowing themselves to be vulnerable, and learning to articulate their needs without guilt. Through this process, they cultivate resilience, empathy, and a really nuanced understanding of human relationships. They learn that emotional expansions, it's not indulgence. It's really like this essential aspect of wisdom. They're really evolving towards this philosophy of abundance that's rooted in connection rather than accumulation. So their life lessons, they really revolve around the realization that wealth is not measured in possessions, but in love and trust, emotional depth. Essentially, they're learning emotional wealth. They're learning to transform their inherited patterns and to embrace vulnerability and to expand through love rather than control. And they're discovering that their deepest wisdom, the truest expansion, comes not from the world outside, but from the courage to feel, to care, to nurture, and to carry fully their heart into every corner of life. Their philosophy is not just about cultivating love or security. It's about learning that the heart itself is the compass. Expansion is not measured by how much they give or protect, but how courageously they navigate the world while still remaining tender. So their true wisdom, it really lies in holding contradictions, vulnerability and strength, attachment and freedom, memory and reinvention. They understand that abundance is not something to be acquired. It's something actually to be embodied, flowing outward in ripples that touch others without depleting themselves. And in living this way, they teach the world that the heart is not a fragile vessel, something that needs to be defended. Instead, it is a limitless horizon in which life and love and growth, they can all unfold without an end. Growth, it's not about controlling life or bending it to our own safety. It's really about, leaning into uncertainty with an open heart and letting every wave of emotion teach, transform, and guide. They reveal that abundance is actually a rhythm, a dance between holding close and letting go, and that the bravest act is to really let your heart remain soft, especially in a world that often asks it to harden. So Jupiter in Cancer, it's a constant reminder that growth isn't found by swimming against the tide, but actually by trusting the current of your own heart. When you learn to let love flow, you actually realize that the real treasure isn't buried deep in the sea. It's actually found in the waves that you make by just being you and allowing the space and time to let others be themselves as well. This placement, it reminds us that love is not a currency to manage, but actually a tide to trust. That tenderness, when chosen again and again, even after heartbreak, it becomes this beautiful and radical act of faith. And maybe that's Jupiter in Cancer's ultimate revelation, that the heart grows most not when it's being protective, but when it's allowed to spill over. Because then it's messy, it's human, it's real. They learn that emotional wealth doesn't come from avoiding loss or pain. It actually comes from the willingness to feel it all, to sit with grief and still choose love, to forgive without erasing the past, and to keep the heart open, even when it's easier to keep it closed. They're understanding that safety is not built by walls, but by trust. And that the generosity of spirit really creates the kind of security that no amount of money could ever buy. In its highest expression, Jupiter in Cancer's emotional wealth becomes contagious. It teaches others that tenderness is not weakness and that vulnerability is not a risk, but truth. And when you love without condition, you really expand beyond the boundaries of self. Their legacy is not in what they leave behind, but in how deeply they made others feel at home within themselves. And that is the kind of wealth that never depletes, it only deepens. The kind that reminds us that the richest life is the one lived with an unguarded heart. That's the magic of Jupiter in Cancer.